The first thing I heard wasn't the alarm. It was glass. Sharp. Violent. Expensive. The kind of sound that instantly tells you something beautiful is breaking forever. I stood barefoot in the middle of a mansion I couldn't afford, holding a fireplace poker in shaking hands, while cold rain blew through the shattered kitchen window. In less than 20 minutes, my friends would arrive for dinner. And if the police didn't believe my fake robbery story before they got here, my entire life would collapse in front of everyone. The candles were already lit. The wine was open. The orchids looked perfect. That was the problem. Everything in that house looked perfect, including me. Long dark hair, silk cream blouse, diamond earrings bought on a payment plan I couldn't survive anymore. I looked exactly like the kind of woman people envied online, and exactly like the kind of woman quietly drowning. Then my phone buzzed. Melissa. Parking now. My stomach dropped. Too early. No. Outside. Sirens wailed through the rain. Inside. I stared at my reflection in the black marble counter and realized something terrifying. I didn't know where the performance ended anymore. The doorbell rang. Long. Aggressive. And right before I opened it, the security alarm exploded through the mansion. Perfect timing. I forced my breathing to shake. Practiced panic. That's the disturbing part. I had rehearsed this. Melissa screamed the second she saw the broken glass. Daniel rushed toward the kitchen. Oh my God, Lena, what happened? Their fear looked real. Mine looked expensive. Then the police arrived. An older officer stepped inside, looked around once, then stared directly at me. You're the homeowner? I smiled. Smooth, polished, and lied. Yes. The officer looked down at the blood near the broken window, then back at me. Silence. Heavy silence. The kind that feels dangerous. You should sit down, Miss Vale. My chest tightened instantly. Not Miss Carter. The fake surname I used online. Vale. My real name. Cold spread through my body, because I never told him that. Then the front door opened behind us. A man stepped into the mansion, dripping rainwater across the marble floor. Calm. Controlled. Familiar. And the second I saw him, I knew my life was over. Because out of everyone who could have walked into that house that night, the absolute worst person had just arrived. My landlord.
The room went quiet before anyone even understood why. That's the strange thing about danger. Sometimes your body recognizes it before your mind does. I stayed frozen beside the kitchen island while rain tapped softly against the shattered window behind me. Then his voice came again. Smooth, controlled, slightly irritated. Lena. Not warm. Not angry either. Worse. Professional. My landlord, Victor Mercer, stepped into the foyer wearing a charcoal overcoat damp from the rain. One hand held car keys. The other adjusted the cuff of his sleeve with the kind of calm precision rich men develop after decades of never hearing the word no. He looked around slowly. The broken glass? the police, my guests, then me. And I knew immediately he understood everything. Not the robbery. The lie. Melissa stood first. Oh, thank God, another owner from the neighborhood. Victor looked at her politely. No, he said. I own this house. The sentence hit the room harder than the sirens had. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the officer turned slightly toward me. And suddenly all the oxygen in the mansion disappeared. Daniel frowned first. What? Victor removed his wet coat carefully, like he was entering a business meeting instead of detonating my entire life. She leases the property temporarily. Leases. Not owns. Not inherited. Not invested. Leases. One precise word dismantled 2 years of manufactured identity. I felt every eye in the room land on me at once. Heavy. Disbelieving. Hungry. Melissa actually laughed nervously, like her brain rejected the information automatically. Wait, what? Victor glanced toward me briefly. Still calm. She never told them? That was the moment humiliation became physical. Not emotional. Physical. My skin burned. My ears rang. I couldn't feel my fingertips anymore. Nobody prepares you for the violence of being seen clearly, especially after spending years constructing a version of yourself designed to prevent exactly that. Daniel looked between us slowly. You said this place was yours. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Because there was no good explanation. Not one that didn't sound pathetic. Outside, thunder rolled low across the hills. Inside, the candles still flickered gently across the dining room table I'd spent 6 hours perfecting. The absurdity of it nearly made me laugh. The orchids, the crystal glasses, the imported olive oil sitting beside handmade pasta I couldn't afford. Every detail suddenly looked desperate instead of elegant. Like a stage set after the audience leaves. The officer crossed his arms quietly. Miss Vale, he said carefully, I think we need to clarify a few things. Clarify. Such a polite word for collapse. Victor stepped farther into the kitchen and looked at the shattered window. For the first time, I saw actual emotion flicker across his face. Not concern. Disappointment. When did this happen? He asked. About 40 minutes ago, the officer answered. Victor nodded once. Then crouched near the broken glass. My pulse stumbled. Because unlike everyone else in that house, Victor knew me intimately. Not romantically. Financially. And financial intimacy is sometimes worse. He knew every late payment. Every excuse. Every extension request sent at 2 a.m. pretending wire transfers were delayed. He knew how many designer bags I returned after filming content with them. He knew my income didn't remotely support the life I displayed online. And now, he was staring directly at the blood I missed cleaning beside the window frame. His eyes lifted slowly toward mine. There it was. Recognition. Not shock. Not confusion. Just confirmation. You injured yourself? He asked quietly. The officer looked at me immediately. So you did cut your hand. I instinctively hid it behind my back. Too late. Melissa stared at me. Lena! That single word hurt more than accusation. because it still carried concern. She wasn't angry yet, only confused. And confusion is sometimes the last mercy people offer before judgment arrives. "I can explain," I said finally. My voice sounded thin, unfamiliar, like it belonged to someone smaller than me. But before I could continue, Victor stood and calmly destroyed the rest of my dignity. "She's behind on rent." Again. Brutal. Absolute. I shut my eyes briefly. Not because he lied. Because he didn't. Daniel exhaled slowly through his nose. "How behind?" Victor looked uncomfortable for the first time. 4 months. Nobody said anything for several seconds. Then one of the women near the dining room whispered, "But her business." And another answered quietly, "I thought she sold that wellness brand." I almost turned around to see who spoke. Almost. But humiliation teaches survival quickly. Never look directly at pity if you can avoid it. The officer interrupted gently. "Miss Vale, did you stage this break-in?" There it was. No softness left now. Just truth standing naked in the middle of the kitchen. My throat tightened instantly. Around me, faces changed again. Concern turning into suspicion. Suspicion turning into calculation. Everyone silently reevaluating every memory they had of me. Every dinner. Every vacation photo. Every story I told. Trying to locate where reality ended. I should have denied it. A smarter woman probably would have. But exhaustion finally outweighed performance. So instead of... I nodded. Very slightly. And Melissa gasped like I'd slapped her. The officer closed his notebook slowly. Victor looked away. And suddenly the house felt enormous. Not luxurious anymore. Empty. Like a museum after hours. "I just needed more time," I whispered. Nobody answered. Rain hammered harder against the windows. "I thought if everyone believed things were still stable," I continued, "I could fix it before anyone noticed." My eyes drifted toward the dining room. Toward the life I built from angles and selective framing. It got bigger than I meant it to. And that was the first night in 6 years. I stopped performing. The room went quiet before anyone even understood why. That's the strange thing about danger. Sometimes your body recognizes it before your mind does. I stayed frozen beside the kitchen island while rain tapped softly against the shattered window behind me. Then his voice came again. Controlled, slightly irritated. "Lena." Not warm. Not angry either. Worse? Professional. My landlord, Victor Mercer, stepped into the foyer wearing a charcoal overcoat damp from the rain. One hand held car keys. The other adjusted the cuff of his sleeve with the kind of calm precision rich men develop after decades of never hearing the word no. He looked around slowly. The broken glass. The police. My guests. And I knew immediately he understood everything. Not the robbery. The lie. Melissa stood first. "Oh, thank God, another owner from the neighborhood." Victor looked at her politely. "No," he said. "I own this house." The sentence hit the room harder than the sirens had. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the officer turned slightly toward me. And suddenly all the oxygen in the mansion disappeared. Daniel frowned first. What? Victor removed his wet coat carefully, like he was entering a business meeting instead of detonating my entire life. She leases the property temporarily. Leases, not owns. Not inherited. Not invested. Leases. One precise word dismantled 2 years of manufactured identity. I felt every eye in the room land on me at once. Heavy. Disbelieving. Hungry. Melissa actually laughed nervously, like her brain rejected the information automatically. Wait, what? Victor glanced toward me briefly. Still calm. She never told them? That was the moment humiliation became physical. Not emotional. Physical. My skin burned. My ears rang. I couldn't feel my fingertips anymore. Nobody prepares you for the violence of being seen clearly, especially after spending years constructing a version of yourself designed to prevent exactly that. Daniel looked between us slowly. You said this place was yours. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out, because there was no good explanation. Not one that didn't sound pathetic. Outside, thunder rolled low across the hills. Inside, the candles still flickered gently across the dining room table I'd spent 6 hours perfecting. The absurdity of it nearly made me laugh. The orchids. The crystal glasses. The imported olive oil sitting beside handmade pasta I couldn't afford. Every detail suddenly looked desperate instead of elegant, like a stage set after the audience leaves. The officer crossed his arms quietly. Miss Vale, he said carefully, I think we need to clarify a few things. Clarify. Such a polite word for collapse. Victor stepped farther into the kitchen and looked at the shattered window. For the first time, I saw actual emotion flicker across his face. Not concern. Disappointment. When did this happen? He asked. About 40 minutes ago, the officer answered. Victor nodded once, then crouched near the broken glass. My pulse stumbled, because unlike everyone else in that house, Victor knew me intimately. Not romantically. Financially. And financial intimacy is sometimes worse. He knew every late payment, every excuse, every extension request sent at 2 a.m. pretending wire transfers were delayed. He knew how many designer bags I returned after filming content with them. He knew my income didn't remotely support the life I displayed online. And now, he was staring directly at the blood I missed cleaning beside the window frame. His eyes lifted slowly toward mine. There it was. Recognition. Not shock. Not confusion. Just confirmation that... You injured yourself? He asked quietly. The officer looked at me immediately. So you did cut your hand. I instinctively hid it behind my back. Too late. Melissa stared at me. Lena. That single word hurt more than accusation, because it still carried concern. She wasn't angry yet, only confused. And confusion is sometimes the last mercy people offer before judgment arrives. I can explain, I said finally. My voice sounded thin, unfamiliar, like it belonged to someone smaller than me. But before I could continue, Victor stood and calmly destroyed the rest of my dignity. She's behind on rent. Silence. Again. Brutal. Absolute. I shut my eyes briefly. Not because he lied. Because he didn't. Daniel exhaled slowly through his nose. How behind? Victor looked uncomfortable for the first time. 4 months. Melissa actually stepped backward, as if distance might protect her from embarrassment by association. Nobody said anything for several seconds. Then one of the women near the dining room whispered, "But her business?" And another answered quietly, "I thought she sold that wellness brand." I almost turned around to see who spoke. Almost. But humiliation teaches survival quickly. Never look directly at pity if you can avoid it. I did sell products, I said carefully. Online. Victor gave a tiny nod. She made good money for a while. For a while. Another knife. Because that was the truth nobody online talks about. The temporary nature of internet success. One viral video can change your life. And 6 silent months can destroy it again. I built my entire identity during the years when everyone wanted aspiration. Morning routines. Luxury aesthetics. Soft life content. Champagne near infinity pools. White kitchens. Perfect lighting. Perfect skin. Perfect homes. People weren't buying products. They were buying proximity to fantasy. And I became very good at selling one. Until the algorithm moved on. As it always does. Brand deals slowed first. Then disappeared entirely. Engagement dropped. Followers stopped commenting. The mortgage lies became harder to maintain. So I compensated the way desperate people do. By making everything look even more expensive. More polished. More successful. Because failure online doesn't happen gradually. It happens publicly. And the cruelest part? The people around me only valued me more while I was secretly drowning. The officer interrupted gently. "Miss Vale, did you stage this break-in?" There it was. No softness left now. Just truth standing naked in the middle of the kitchen. My throat tightened instantly. Around me, faces changed again. Concern turning into suspicion. Suspicion turning into calculation. Everyone silently reevaluating every memory they had of me. Every dinner. Every vacation photo. Every story I told. Trying to locate where reality ended. I should have denied it. A smarter woman probably would have. But exhaustion finally outweighed performance. So instead, I nodded. Very slightly. And Melissa gasped like I'd slapped her. The officer closed his notebook slowly. Victor looked away. And suddenly the house felt enormous. Not luxurious anymore. Empty. Like a museum after hours. "I just needed more time," I whispered. Nobody answered. Rain hammered harder against the windows. "I thought if everyone believed things were still stable," I continued, "I could fix it before anyone noticed." My eyes drifted toward the dining room. Toward the life I built from angles and selective framing. It got bigger than I meant it to. Daniel stared at me carefully. "You let us think you owned this place for 2 years. Not yelling. Somehow worse. I nodded again. He looked genuinely wounded. "I defended you constantly." That sentence sliced deeper than the others because I knew exactly what he meant. People had questioned me before, quietly. Jealously. and Daniel always shut it down. She works hard. She's smart. She earned it. He believed in me harder than I believed in myself. Melissa folded her arms tightly across her chest. Why didn't you just tell us the truth? I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because people only ask that question after the illusion collapses. Never during the performance. The truth, I said softly. The truth is nobody wants to hear you're failing. My voice steadied now. Not defensive anymore. Just tired. When I started making money online, everyone treated me differently. Brands, friends, men, even my own family. I looked around slowly. No one interrupted. Because they knew. When the money slowed down, I continued, I got scared. Scared of becoming ordinary again. Scared people would stop inviting me places. Scared success was the only interesting thing about me. And the worst part? Part of me genuinely believed that. The officer remained quiet for a long moment. Then finally asked, So the robbery was supposed to accomplish what exactly? I swallowed hard. To explain why I'd have to leave the house. Another silence. Smaller this time. Sadness replacing shock. Victor rubbed his jaw slowly. You could have just walked away. I looked at him. No, I said honestly. I couldn't. Because walking away would require admitting I was never the woman everyone thought I was. And at some point, that fake woman became easier to protect than the real one. Then something unexpected happened. Melissa sat beside me again. Slowly. Carefully. Like approaching someone unstable. She looked exhausted. Angry too. But not cruel. Not yet. You should have called me, she whispered. That almost broke me completely. Because kindness after exposure feels unbearable. Tears finally blurred my vision for the first time that night. Real ones. Not staged. Not useful. Just grief. For the money. For the lies. For the woman I kept trying to become instead of the one I already was. And then Victor quietly delivered the final blow. There's something else. I looked up immediately. Every instinct in my body tightened. Because rich men only use that tone when damage is about to multiply. Victor reached into his coat pocket, pulled out an envelope, and placed it carefully on the kitchen counter between us. I wasn't coming tonight because of the robbery, he said. My stomach dropped. I came to serve you eviction papers. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. And as thunder shook the windows again, I realized the fake robbery hadn't destroyed my life. It had simply exposed how close it already was to collapsing. But what none of them knew yet was that the house wasn't the only thing I was lying about. And the second secret was far worse. If you've ever built a version of yourself that became impossible to escape, subscribe before part 3. Because after the eviction papers hit that counter, someone in that room discovered what I'd really been hiding upstairs. Nobody noticed Melissa leave the kitchen. Not at first. The room was too heavy with silence. Too full of shattered assumptions and unfinished judgments. Rain hammered against the tall windows while the eviction papers sat untouched between me and Victor like something radioactive. The officer quietly spoke into his radio near the hallway. Daniel stared at the floor. and I sat there trying to keep my breathing even while my entire identity bled out across imported marble countertops. Then we heard Melissa scream upstairs. Not loud, startled. The kind of sound people make when confusion turns into fear halfway through the inhale. Every head snapped upward instantly. "What happened?" Daniel shouted. No answer. Just hurried footsteps above us. Then another voice. Melissa again. Lower this time. Oh my God! My stomach collapsed. Because I knew exactly what she found. Before anyone could stop me, I was already moving. I ran upstairs barefoot, slipping slightly on the polished staircase while Victor called after me. The hallway lights glowed soft amber against cream-colored walls. Beautiful. Artificial. Every inch of that house suddenly felt like scenery in a play that had run too long. Melissa stood near the end of the hallway outside the guest bedroom. I always kept locked. My chest tightened violently. The door was open. Of course it was. In the chaos downstairs, I'd forgotten to lock it again. Melissa turned toward me slowly. Her face looked pale. Not angry anymore. Just disturbed. What is this? I couldn't answer. Because the room behind her answered for me. Shelving units lined every wall. Metal racks. Storage bins. Photography lights. Dozens of unopened luxury brand boxes stacked floor to ceiling. Shoes. Handbags. Perfume packages. Designer coats still wrapped in plastic. An entire fake life organized like warehouse inventory. Daniel stopped beside me and stared into the room. What the hell? Another guest whispered. Is this all yours? No. Not really. That was the problem. The officer stepped into the hallway behind us while Victor remained farther back, silent now. Watching. Always watching. Melissa slowly picked up a handbag from one of the shelves. The price tag still hung from the strap. So this is where everything came from. Her voice sounded small. Wounded. I looked away. What nobody understood yet was that the room wasn't just storage. It was strategy. Every item had a purpose. Film content. Return within 30 days. Rotate appearance. Create illusion of endless luxury. Repeat. I knew influencers who did worse. Women with rented jewelry posing beside leased cars parked outside homes. They toured for 15-minute content shoots. The internet rewards aspiration, not honesty. And eventually the line between aspiration and fraud becomes microscopic. There's more, Melissa said quietly. My blood went cold again. Because there shouldn't have been more. Not anything visible. She pointed toward the back corner. Toward the desk. Toward the laptop I forgot to close. The screen still glowed softly in the dim room. An email thread sat open. Large numbers visible across spreadsheets. Red overdue notices. Payment plans. Credit balances. Loan extensions. My entire financial collapse illuminated in cold white light. Daniel looked at the screen for several long seconds. Then turned toward me slowly. How much debt are you in? I stayed silent. Not to manipulate. Not strategically. I genuinely didn't know the exact number anymore. That's the terrifying thing about financial desperation. At some point, you stop calculating damage because survival becomes hourly. His voice hardened slightly. How much? I swallowed. Almost 300,000. The room physically reacted. Gasps up. Movement. Someone muttered. Jesus Christ. Melissa sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. You were posting vacation photos 3 weeks ago. I know. You bought a Cartier bracelet. It was financed. You told us your business was expanding. I thought it would. The answers came automatically. No performance left. No elegance. Just wreckage. The officer glanced around the room carefully. Then at me. You need to understand something, he said calmly. What you did tonight is serious. I nodded immediately. I know. No, he corrected softly. I don't think you do. That landed harder than shouting would have. Because he wasn't humiliating me. He genuinely thought I was detached from reality. And maybe he was right. Victor finally stepped into the room. His gaze moved across the shelves slowly. Disappointment settled deeper into his face with every second. How long? He asked. I looked at him. What? How long have you been pretending? Pretending? Such a childish word for something that consumed my entire adult life. I sat down slowly in the desk chair. The photography lights around the room reflected off silver packaging and mirrored surfaces, making everything look harsh and exposed. Like an interrogation room disguised as luxury. Since I was 26, I admitted. Melissa frowned. That's 6 years. I nodded. The truth came out strangely calm after that. Like once the first wall collapses, the others no longer require force. I told them about the first viral video. A skincare routine filmed inside a hotel bathroom I couldn't afford. How overnight followers multiplied. Brands started emailing. Women commented things like, "Your life feels so peaceful." Goals. Inspire me. I'd never inspired anyone before. That's the dangerous part. Attention becomes emotional, oxygen frighteningly fast. Especially when you spent most of your life feeling invisible. So I upgraded the illusion. Better clothes. Better locations. Better lighting. Every successful post bought me another month of relevance. Another month of validation. Another month where people looked at me like I mattered. And then the algorithm shifted. New faces appeared. Younger women. Richer women. More extreme lifestyles. The internet consumes people quickly. Especially women over 30. Especially women whose value is attached to image. So instead of downsizing, Victor said quietly, you escalated. Because failure online doesn't encourage honesty. It encourages performance. You panic smile through collapse. The officer moved closer to the desk. You staged a felony because you were embarrassed. No, I said softly. He frowned slightly. I looked around the room. At the shelves. The labels. The fake perfection. Then finally told the truth completely. I staged it because I didn't know who I was without all this anymore. Different this time. Not judgment. Recognition. Even Victor looked away briefly after that. Because whether people admit it or not, Most modern lives contain some level of performance. Mine just became criminal. Then Daniel noticed something near the laptop. A folder. And black. He picked it up before I could react. And suddenly real panic hit me for the first time all night. Daniel. Too late. He opened it. His expression changed instantly. Confusion first, then disbelief, then something much worse. Lena, he whispered. The room tightened around me. Melissa stood again. What is it? Daniel looked directly at me. You told people your parents were dead. I stopped breathing. Slowly, very slowly, he pulled a stack of documents from the folder. Medical bills, care facility invoices, monthly treatment statements, and right on top, my mother's name. Alive. Nobody spoke. I couldn't even feel the room anymore. Only pressure. Crushing. Inescapable pressure. Melissa stared at the papers. You said they died in a car accident. I closed my eyes briefly. Because I had said that. Hundreds of times. Interviews, podcasts, live streams. The tragic backstory tested well with audiences. That sentence alone made me sick now. God! My father did die, I whispered. But my mother is in assisted care, Daniel interrupted. His voice cracked slightly. You lied about your mother being dead? The disgust in his face finally arrived. Not confusion anymore. Not pity. And honestly, that was the moment I hated myself too. Not for the house. Not for the money. For her. She has dementia, I said quietly. No one moved. I forced myself to continue. She stopped recognizing me years ago. My throat tightened painfully. And eventually it became easier online to say she was gone than explain what was happening. Melissa covered her mouth. The officer remained completely still. Victor looked at me differently now. Not like a fraud. Like someone emotionally damaged in a way money couldn't explain. I still pay for her care, I said quickly. Too quickly. Desperate to sound less monstrous. That's where most of the debt came from at first. The room softened slightly. Just slightly, but not enough. Why hide her? Melissa whispered. I stared at the floor. Because the answer was ugly. Because sick parents don't fit luxury branding. Because audiences love grief but struggle with slow decline. Because saying, my mother is dying little by little every year makes people uncomfortable. And uncomfortable stories don't sell skincare products. I was ashamed, I admitted. The honesty tasted poisonous. Then suddenly my phone buzzed loudly on the desk. Everyone flinched. I looked down automatically. Unknown number. 3 missed calls already. Then another text appeared. I read it once. Then again. My blood turned to ice. Victor noticed immediately. What is it? I couldn't answer. Not right away. Because the message said only 6 words. But those 6 words changed everything. Your mother is missing from the facility. And in that exact moment, the fake robbery, the debt, the eviction, all of it had stopped mattering. Because somewhere in the city, a woman who no longer remembered my face had disappeared into the rain. For a second, nobody moved. The rain outside sounded louder than the room itself, heavy against the windows, heavy against the roof, heavy enough to make the entire mansion feel submerged underwater. I kept staring at the message on my phone like the words might rearrange themselves into something less catastrophic. Your mother is missing from the facility. 3 minutes ago. 2 missed calls after that. Then another text. We already contacted local police. Melissa stepped closer first. What happened? My mouth opened. Nothing came out. Because fear does strange things to language. It turns intelligent people into static. Daniel took the phone gently from my hand and read the screen. His entire face changed. Everything ugly between us paused instantly. Oh, God. The officer moved forward immediately. Which facility? St. Catherine's Memory Center, I answered automatically. How long has she been missing? I don't know. My voice cracked hard on the last word. I hated that. I hated crying in front of people, especially after spending years building an image around composure. But panic doesn't care about branding. The officer spoke calmly into his radio while Victor took his car keys back out. We should go now, Victor said. No hesitation. No resentment. Just action. And somehow that almost hurt more than judgment. 20 minutes earlier, I had committed a crime inside his property. Now he was offering to help me search for my mother. Human beings are complicated like that. The mansion emptied quickly after that. Guests gathered their coats awkwardly. Nobody knew what version of me they were leaving behind. The liar. The criminal. The daughter. Maybe all three. Melissa touched my arm near the front door. I'm coming with you. You don't have to. I know. A pause. Then quietly. But I think you do. Outside, the rain soaked through my blouse almost instantly. Police lights painted the wet driveway blue and red while thunder rolled somewhere above the hills. The luxury cars parked outside suddenly looked absurd, like props abandoned after filming. Victor drove. I sat in the passenger seat, clutching my phone so tightly my fingers hurt. Melissa and Daniel followed behind us with the officer. The city lights blurred across the windshield while rain hammered the glass hard enough to distort everything beyond it. It felt fitting somehow. My entire life had become distortion. She wanders sometimes? Victor asked carefully after several minutes. I nodded. Not often. When was the last episode? 8 months ago. Kept his eyes on the road. You should have told someone you were handling this alone. I laughed weakly. Not because it was funny. Because that sentence summarized my entire life. The Memory Center sat 25 minutes outside downtown near a quiet residential district lined with dark trees and medical buildings. When we arrived, 2 staff members were already waiting beneath the awning. One of them recognized me instantly, and the expression on her face nearly destroyed me. Not judgment. Not anger. Relief. Thank God, she breathed. I'm so sorry, I said immediately. The apology came out instinctively. Like maybe if I apologized fast enough, I could undo every selfish thing I'd done that year. She slipped out during shift transition, the nurse explained while leading us inside. We noticed within minutes. The lobby smelled faintly of disinfectant and lavender. Soft piano music played overhead. Warm lighting. Artificial comfort. I hated places like this because they tried so hard to make loss feel gentle. There's nothing gentle about watching someone disappear while their body stays alive. Did she say where she was going? I asked. The nurse hesitated, then nodded slowly. She kept repeating one thing. Fear climbed sharply through my chest. The nurse looked at me carefully. She said she needed to find her daughter before television people ruined her life. I stopped walking. Completely. Because suddenly I understood. Even through dementia, some fractured part of my mother still remembered me performing. Pretending. Becoming someone unreal. Melissa glanced at me quietly but said nothing. For once, silence felt merciful. The staff showed us security footage next. My mother appeared on screen wearing a pale blue cardigan and carrying her old leather purse against her chest. She looked smaller than I remembered. Fragile, but determined. At 8:14 p.m. she slipped through a side entrance during delivery unloading, then disappeared into rain. Alone. They already searched nearby streets, the officer explained. But weather's getting worse. Victor immediately looked at the map on the security desk. What's within walking distance? The nurse pointed. Bus stop. Pharmacy. Small shopping district. Train station farther east. She used to take trains constantly when I was little, I whispered. Everyone looked at me. I swallowed hard. When she got overwhelmed, and suddenly a memory hit me so sharply it physically hurt. I was 8 years old, sitting beside my mother inside a nearly empty commuter train while rain streaked across the windows. She'd skipped work that day after my father left us. We rode trains for hours without speaking. At one point, she touched my hair gently and said, "Sometimes movement feels easier than staying still." I closed my eyes briefly. She'll head somewhere familiar. The search spread quickly after that. Police vehicles, security staff. Victor calling private contacts. Daniel checking nearby stores. Melissa stayed beside me through all of it, despite having every reason not to. And that loyalty cut deeper than betrayal ever could. We searched for nearly 2 hours. Rainwater soaked through my clothes. My makeup disappeared. My hair flattened against my face. By midnight, I no longer looked like the woman from my social media account. Strangely, that felt like relief. Around 12:40 a.m., Daniel called. I think we found her. My knees nearly gave out. Where? Union Station. The station glowed dim gold against sheets of rain when we arrived. Mostly empty except for a few exhausted travelers and late-night workers. I spotted her immediately, sitting alone on a bench beneath the departure board, still holding that old leather purse. For several seconds, I couldn't move, because dementia had stolen so much from her already. But sitting there in the rain-damp station lights, she still looked like my mother. I approached slowly, carefully, like sudden movement might break the moment. Mom? She looked up. Her eyes searched my face. Lost, confused, then briefly, recognition flickered. Not complete. But enough. There you are, she whispered. My chest cracked open. I knelt in front of her immediately. You scared me. She touched my cheek softly. You used to cry quieter than this? That nearly ended me. Because she was right. When I was little, I cried silently so nobody would hear. Some habits survive every version of yourself. I had to come find you, she murmured. You were disappearing again. Tears blurred my vision instantly. Not dramatic tears. Exhausted ones. The kind that arrive after your body can't carry pressure anymore. Behind me, I could feel the others watching quietly. No phones. No whispers. No performance. Just people witnessing something painfully human. My mother leaned closer suddenly. You don't have to impress everybody all the time, she whispered. Then she frowned slightly. Like she no longer understood where she was. Or who I was. The moment vanished almost immediately. But it was enough. Enough to destroy every lie I'd built around myself. Because somewhere beneath illness and memory loss, she still recognized the frightened daughter underneath all the performance. The train announcement echoed overhead softly. Rain streaked the station windows. And sitting there beside her, soaked and emotionally stripped bare, I finally understood something that terrified me. I had spent years trying to become aspirational because I thought ordinary people disappeared. But the people who truly loved me had been searching for the ordinary version all along. Victor quietly approached from behind after several minutes. We should get her warm. I nodded, then looked up at him carefully. I'm sorry about the house. He exhaled slowly. That house isn't really the problem anymore. It wasn't. Because by then the mansion already felt irrelevant. The fake robbery. The luxury branding. The endless performance. All of it suddenly looked small compared to sitting beside a woman slowly losing her memories while still somehow remembering the shape of my fear. As we helped my mother stand, she squeezed my hand unexpectedly tight. Then she asked the question that finally shattered the last piece of me still pretending. Are you happy now? I couldn't answer. Because for the first time in years, I genuinely didn't know. And while the station lights flickered softly across the wet floor, I realized rebuilding my life would cost far more than money. It would require becoming someone honest enough to survive without applause. But what I didn't know yet was that by morning the fake robbery story would explode online. And millions of strangers were about to decide what kind of woman they thought I really was. I fell asleep for 23 minutes. Not in a bed. Not even intentionally. Curled sideways in a plastic chair beside my mother's hospital room while early morning news murmured from a television mounted near the ceiling. When I opened my eyes again, my entire life had changed. The first thing I noticed was my phone vibrating against the floor. Again. An endless mechanical panic. I picked it up slowly, and immediately wished I hadn't. Missed calls. Hundreds of notifications. Messages stacking faster than I could read them. My name. My face. The mansion. Everywhere. Melissa looked up from the corner of the room where she'd been nursing stale coffee in exhausted silence. You probably shouldn't look yet. Too late. I already had. Someone had leaked footage from outside the house. Police cars. The shattered window. guests standing in the driveway, and worst of all, video of Victor saying, "She leases the property temporarily." That single clip had already spread everywhere. Because humiliation travels online faster than truth ever will. The headlines were brutal. Fake heiress exposed after staged robbery. Influencer accused of fraudulent lifestyle scam. The internet's favorite self-made millionaire was renting everything. I stared numbly at the screen while comments multiplied beneath every post. Some cruel, some fascinated, some weirdly delighted. People love public collapse because it reassures them their own private failures are still hidden. She deserves jail. I knew she was fake. This is why I don't trust influencers. Imagine lying about your dead mother too. That last one punched straight through my chest. Because now that secret was spreading too. Of course it was. Nothing stays private once the internet smells blood. I lowered the phone slowly. My hands had stopped shaking. That scared me more than panic would have. Because numbness means your nervous system has surrendered temporarily. How bad is it? Melissa asked tearfully. I looked at her, then gave the only honest answer possible. Worse than the robbery. Across the room, my mother slept quietly beneath thin hospital blankets. Gray morning light filtered through the blinds, soft against her face. She looked peaceful, detached from the disaster consuming my world outside that room. And suddenly I envied her memory loss in a way that made me hate myself. Daniel entered 20 minutes later carrying fresh clothes and a paper bag of food nobody touched. His expression told me everything before he even spoke. There are reporters outside. Of course there were. Public humiliation is modern entertainment. Especially when the woman falling apart once sold perfection for a living. Victor arrived shortly after him. Still composed. Still calm. Only now there was visible exhaustion around his eyes too. We need to discuss legal damage control, he said quietly. Damage control. Interesting phrase. As if my life had become a corporate oil spill. I followed him into the hallway outside my mother's room while nurses moved softly around us. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee. Real-life smells. Not curated candle scents and imported flowers. Victor handed me his phone. An article filled the screen. Photos of me entering restaurants. Vacation clips. Luxury handbags. My old interviews. They'd assembled my entire online identity overnight like prosecutors building a criminal case. Then I saw the number at the top. 12 million views. My stomach dropped. This will keep growing, Victor said carefully. You need a public statement immediately. I laughed once under my breath. Not because anything was funny. Because I'd spent 6 years manufacturing image. And now strangers wanted authenticity on demand. What exactly should I say? I asked. That I'm a pathological liar with financing options? Victor rubbed his jaw slowly. You tell the truth. The simplicity of that answer almost offended me. Because people who've never built their survival around performance think honesty is easy. It isn't. Not once your identity depends on applause. There's more, Victor added quietly. The tone in his voice tightened something inside my chest instantly. What now? He hesitated. A former employee contacted a reporter this morning. Cold spread through my body. What employee? The assistant you fired last year. Nina? Ah, of course. I leaned back against the hallway wall slowly. Because Nina knew things. Not criminal things. Worse. Personal things. She claims you knowingly manipulated followers emotionally for engagement, Victor continued. Closed my eyes. Because she wasn't entirely wrong. Nina started working for me during the peak years. Back when sponsorship deals flooded in daily and brands flew me across countries to smile beside rooftop pools holding skincare products. She organized schedules, edited content, filtered comments. But eventually she started seeing behind the performance too clearly. And proximity to illusion either recruits people or disgusts them. What did she tell them? I asked quietly. Victor looked uncomfortable. She provided screenshots. Of course she did. Receipts are currency online. He handed me another article. This one included leaked messages. My messages. Careless ones. Exhausted ones. Honest ones. One screenshot read, "People engage more when I sound emotionally broken." Another, "Post the crying clip Thursday night. Sad content performs better before weekends." My stomach twisted violently. Because stripped of context, those messages looked monstrous. Maybe they were monstrous. You don't understand, I whispered weakly. Victor looked at me steadily. Then explain it. And suddenly I was crying again. Not elegantly. Not cinematically. Ugly, exhausted crying in the middle of a hospital hallway while nurses avoided looking directly at me. I got trapped, I admitted. The words tore coming out. At first it was just branding. Then metrics controlled everything. I wiped my face hard. If I posted luxury, people engaged. If I posted vulnerability, engagement doubled. If I disappeared for a week, brands panicked. I looked at him helplessly. The algorithm trains you like an animal. Victor stayed quiet. So I kept going. Eventually, I stopped knowing which emotions were real anymore. That was the truth nobody outside influencer culture fully understands. When your sadness becomes profitable, you start observing yourself while you're suffering. You think, this angle looks honest. This lighting makes me look tired. People will relate to this. And once your brain starts converting pain into performance, something inside you rots quietly. I hated myself most days, I whispered. Victor's expression softened slightly. Not sympathy exactly. Recognition. Maybe he'd seen this kind of emptiness before in different forms. You still made choices, he said carefully. Yes. That word came immediately. Because accountability finally felt less frightening than pretending. Back inside the room, Melissa was helping my mother eat small pieces of toast while Daniel adjusted the television volume lower. The domestic normalcy of it nearly shattered me. After everything, they were still here. My mother suddenly looked toward me. For one miraculous second, clarity sharpened her eyes again. I froze. Because she almost never said my name clearly anymore. She frowned softly. You look tired. A broken laugh escaped me instantly. Yeah, I whispered. I know. Then her confusion returned. The moment disappeared. But somehow that tiny flash of recognition mattered more than the millions of strangers destroying me online. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. Then I saw the voicemail transcription preview, and every drop of blood drained from my body. We need to discuss your father's money. I stopped breathing. Because my father didn't leave money. At least, that's what I'd believed for 15 years. Victor noticed immediately. What is it? I looked up slowly. The hospital room suddenly felt too small. Too bright. Too fragile. Then quietly, carefully, I replayed the voicemail aloud. A male voice filled the room. Older. Controlled. Unfamiliar. Lena Vale, my name is Arthur Bennett. I handled certain financial matters for your father before his death. Recent media attention made locating you easier. There are documents you need to see regarding assets transferred shortly before he died. A pause. Then the sentence that changed everything. Your father may not have lost everything the way you were told. Nobody in the room moved. Not Melissa. Not Daniel. Not Victor. Not even me. Because suddenly the foundation of my entire childhood shifted beneath my feet. All my life I believed my father died bankrupt. That his business collapsed. That our family fell apart because there was nothing left. That financial instability was inherited like bad blood. But if that wasn't true, then someone lied. And somewhere beneath my fake identity, my ruined reputation, and my collapsing life, another hidden story had just opened its eyes. I listened to the voicemail 4 times. Not because I didn't understand it, because I did. And understanding it terrified me. My father may not have lost everything the way you were told. That sentence kept moving through my head like broken glass. Sharp. Impossible to hold safely. Outside my mother's hospital room, morning sunlight had finally broken through the rain clouds. The windows glowed pale gold across sterile floors while nurses rolled carts quietly down the hallway. Normal morning sounds, completely disconnected from the fact that my entire understanding of my childhood might have been fabricated. Daniel spoke first. Could it be a scam? Victor shook his head immediately. We looked at him. He folded his arms slowly. I know the name Arthur Bennett. Something tightened in my chest. How? He handled estate law for high net worth clients for years. High net worth. The phrase sounded absurd, connected to my father. My father died exhausted. Overworked. Defeated. At least that's the version I carried my entire life. Melissa frowned. You never mentioned your dad had money. I laughed weakly. Because he didn't. Then quieter. I think. Victor studied me carefully. You said his business failed. That's what my mother always told me. And after his death? We lost the house within 8 months. I paused. She sold almost everything. Even saying it aloud suddenly sounded strange. Too fast. Too complete. My mother stirred softly in the hospital bed behind us. Fragile beneath white blankets. For years I blamed her grief for the chaos that followed my father's death. But now, a dangerous question had entered the room. What if grief wasn't the only reason things disappeared? The voicemail included an address downtown. Private office. No details. Just come alone if possible. Which naturally guaranteed I would not be going alone. An hour later, Victor drove us into the city while my mother remained under observation. Melissa insisted on staying with her. Daniel insisted on coming with me. And strangely, I didn't argue with either of them anymore. Because once your entire fake identity collapses publicly, independence loses some of its glamour. Downtown looked different that morning. Not physically. Psychologically. Every billboard advertising luxury watches and private banking suddenly felt personal. Like the whole city survived by selling aspiration to frightened people. At a red light, Daniel glanced sideways at me. "You okay?" The honesty surprised both of us. For years, my instinct had been automatic performance. "I'm fine. Everything's good. Just busy." But exhaustion had burned the script out of me. And strangely, telling the truth felt less painful now than maintaining illusions. Victor parked outside an older stone office building, tucked between modern glass towers. Quiet. Expensive. Invisible in the way truly wealthy places often are. No flashy branding, no oversized logos. Just discretion. Arthur Bennett looked exactly like a man trusted with generational secrets. Late 60s. Silver hair. Perfect posture. Voice soft enough to force people into listening carefully. He greeted Victor first, then looked at me for a long moment. "You resemble your father more now than when you were younger." That sentence unsettled me immediately. Not because of what it meant, because he remembered me at all. His office smelled faintly of old paper and cedarwood. The walls carried framed photographs with politicians, judges, businessmen. Power displayed quietly. Not performatively. Real power never needs to shout. Arthur motioned for us to sit, then opened a thick file across the desk. "I debated contacting you for years," he admitted. "Why now?" I asked. He looked at me carefully. "Because public humiliation changes leverage." Crept up my spine. Meaning? Meaning the people involved no longer view you as dangerous. Silence. Heavy. Immediate. Daniel leaned forward. "Involved in what exactly?" Arthur ignored him. Still watching me. "Your father did not die bankrupt, Lena." The room tilted slightly. He liquidated significant assets 6 months before his death. I frowned instantly. "That's impossible." Arthur slid documents across the desk. "It was deliberate." I stared at the papers without touching them. Bank transfers, property movements, corporate dissolutions, amounts large enough to make my stomach tighten. "How much money?" I whispered. Arthur answered calmly. "Several million." I physically recoiled. Because it didn't fit reality. Nothing about my childhood after his death suggested hidden wealth. We struggled constantly. Utilities cut off. Debt collectors. My mother crying alone at night in the kitchen. None of that aligns with millions disappearing quietly. "Where did it go?" Victor asked. Arthur finally looked at him. "That," he said carefully, "is where things become complicated." He opened another folder. This one thinner, older. Inside sat photographs. Not financial records. People. One image showed my father beside 3 other men outside a hotel conference entrance. All wealthy. all smiling. All strangers to me except one. And the second I recognized him, my entire body locked. Victor noticed instantly. You know him? I nodded slowly, too stunned to lie. Because the man standing beside my father in the photograph was Senator Elliot Crane, one of the most recognizable political figures in the country, and currently leading multiple televised investigations into financial corruption. Arthur watched my reaction carefully. Your father worked with Crane briefly during a private infrastructure project years ago. No, I whispered automatically. Because my father hated politics. Hated wealthy men in suits. Hated corruption. At least that's what he told me. Arthur folded his hands together. Your father discovered financial misconduct connected to that project. The air left the room. Daniel frowned. What kind of misconduct? Arthur hesitated for the first time, then quietly answered, money laundering. Silence detonated between us. I stared at him, unable to process the sentence fully. My father? The exhausted man who taught me never to cheat board games? Who clipped grocery coupons obsessively? Who once drove 40 minutes because another gas station was 3 cents cheaper? He found evidence? Victor asked. Arthur nodded once, and intended to expose it. My chest tightened painfully. Then what happened? Arthur's expression darkened. He died 3 weeks later. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Because the implication arrived before words did. You think he was killed? Daniel asked carefully. Arthur immediately shook his head. No official evidence supports that. Official. Interesting word choice. But unofficially? Victor pressed. Arthur leaned back slowly. Unofficially, your father became frightened near the end. I felt cold all over. He moved assets quietly before his death. He transferred documents through multiple channels. He believed something was wrong. I swallowed hard. Did my mother know? Arthur looked at me for a long moment. That hurt more than everything else. She helped him move portions of the money, Arthur continued softly. After his death, she disappeared financially on purpose. I stared at him. What does that mean? It means your mother intentionally made your family appear ruined. The room spun. Because suddenly everything rearranged itself. The fast sale of the house. The sudden isolation. The secrecy. The fear. Her refusal to discuss my father's business. She protected something, Arthur said quietly. Or someone. I stood abruptly and walked toward the office window because sitting still suddenly felt impossible. Below us, traffic crawled through downtown streets while pedestrians moved beneath umbrellas, completely unaware my entire history had just split open. All these years, I whispered. She lied to me. Arthur's voice softened. Possibly to save you. I laughed bitterly under my breath. Funny how everyone keeps deciding who I should be protected from. Behind me, Victor asked the question I was too afraid to ask myself. Where's the money now? Arthur didn't answer immediately, which meant the answer mattered. A lot. Finally, he reached into the desk drawer, then placed a small silver key onto the table between us. Safe deposit key. My pulse began hammering again. Your father left instructions, Arthur said quietly. If anything ever happened to your mother cognitively, this was to go to you. I stared at the key like it might explode. For what? Arthur held my gaze steadily. For the truth. And in that exact moment, my phone started ringing again. Unknown number. But this time there was no voicemail preview. Just silence vibrating in my hand. Over and over. Victor frowned. Answer it. Every instinct told me not to. But I did. Slowly, carefully. For 2 seconds, nobody spoke on the other end. Then a male voice finally whispered, "Stop looking into your father." My blood froze instantly. The voice continued, calm, motionless. Some lies protect families, Lena. Click. The line died. Nobody in the office moved. Because suddenly this wasn't just family history anymore. This was danger. Real danger. And for the first time since the fake robbery, I understood something terrifying. The worst lie in my life might not have been mine. Nobody spoke for several seconds after the call ended. Arthur Bennett's office suddenly felt smaller. Too warm. Quiet. The city traffic below the windows sounded distant now, like noise underwater. Victor was the first to move. Did you recognize the voice? I shook my head immediately. No accent. No emotion. Just controlled calm, which somehow felt worse than anger. Daniel leaned forward. You need to call the police. Arthur answered before I could. And tell them what exactly? His tone wasn't dismissive. Just realistic. A vague phone threat connected to a 20-year-old financial case with no official investigation. He folded his hands again. They'll document it. Nothing more. I stared at the silver key sitting on the desk. Small. Ordinary. Impossible looking. The kind of object that changes meaning depending on what it unlocks. Where's the box? I asked quietly. Arthur slid another paper across the table. Private banking branch. Downtown. 3 blocks away. Of course it was close. People with dangerous secrets rarely store them far from themselves. Victor looked at his watch. We go now. Arthur immediately shook his head. Everyone turned toward him. For the next few hours, he said carefully, you assume your phones are compromised. A chill moved through the room. Daniel frowned. That's paranoid. Arthur met his eyes calmly. Your generation mistakes caution for paranoia because you document your entire lives voluntarily. Silence. Because, unfortunately, he had a point. Arthur stood and walked toward the office window. When your father became frightened, he said quietly, he stopped trusting visibility. Visibility. The thing I spent years chasing online like oxygen. He believed attention made people vulnerable, Arthur continued. Especially people who confused public admiration with safety. The sentence landed directly inside me. Because I had done exactly that. Built an entire life around being seen. Without realizing visibility also creates targets. Victor picked up the keys slowly. You think someone monitored media coverage and realized she might start asking questions. Arthur nodded once. The scandal made her visible again. There it was. The horrifying irony. My public humiliation had reopened something buried for years. I suddenly thought about my mother wandering through rain trying to find me. "You're disappearing again." That's what she'd said. Maybe she wasn't talking about social media. Maybe some part of her remembered danger attached to visibility. Arthur handed Victor a folded sheet of paper. "No phones after you leave this building. No calls, no messages." Daniel exhaled sharply. "This is insane." Arthur looked at him evenly. "You still believe dangerous people announce themselves dramatically?" Then quietly, "They usually sound reasonable." The elevator ride downstairs felt suffocating. Nobody spoke. I watched our reflections in the mirrored walls. Victor composed but tense. Daniel unsettled, knee pale and exhausted beneath borrowed hospital scrubs and a wool coat Melissa found in her car earlier. I barely recognized myself anymore. Strangely, that felt honest. Outside, afternoon sunlight reflected harshly off wet sidewalks from the earlier storm. The city had resumed normal life. People carrying coffee. Business meetings, tourists taking photos. Completely unaware, my reality had tilted into something almost unrecognizable within 12 hours. Victor stopped before reaching the car. His eyes moved casually across the street, then slightly upward. "What?" I whispered. He didn't answer immediately. Just guided us toward the vehicle calmly. Too calmly. Only after the doors closed did he speak. "Black sedan across the intersection." Daniel turned automatically. Victor grabbed his arm instantly. "Don't." The sharpness in his voice froze all of us. "Could be nothing," Victor said quietly. "But from this point forward we assume otherwise." My pulse began climbing again. Because suddenly every ordinary movement outside looked suspicious. Every pedestrian, every parked vehicle, every glance. Fear reorganizes the world quickly. Victor drove without using navigation. Several unnecessary turns. 2 parking garages. 1 abrupt stop near a crowded shopping district. At first I thought he was overreacting. Then I noticed the same black sedan 2 intersections behind us. Always distant. Always present. Daniel saw it too. "Oh my God." No one answered. Because acknowledging fear out loud makes it heavier. "We're not going to the bank yet," Victor said. "Then where?" I asked. "I need to know whether they're actually following us." He pulled into the underground garage of an expensive hotel downtown. Concrete walls echoed around us while fluorescent lights flickered overhead. The air smelled faintly of gasoline and damp cement. Not cinematic danger. Real danger. Messy. Confusing. Quiet. Victor parked beside a service elevator, then turned toward us fully for the first time. "When we get out," he said calmly, "you separate." Daniel frowned immediately. "That's a terrible idea." "No, staying predictable is the terrible idea." He looked at me. "You stay with me." Then at Daniel, "You walk through the lobby and exit onto 5th. And if someone follows?" Victor held his gaze. "Then we know." Everything inside me screamed this situation had become absurd. 24 hours ago I was staging fake crimes to protect social status. Now I was hiding in a hotel parking garage discussing surveillance connected to my dead father. The psychological whiplash alone felt unbearable. Daniel eventually nodded. then looked at me carefully. If this gets dangerous, it already is, Victor interrupted quietly. No one argued. Because again, he was right. Daniel exited first. We watched through the windshield as he disappeared into the elevator lobby. 3 minutes later, Victor checked his watch, then started the car again. We remained parked. What happens if someone really is following us? I asked. Victor looked forward. Then your father left something important enough to frighten people 20 years later. 5 minutes passed. Then my phone buzzed silently in my coat pocket. A message from Daniel. He followed me. Cold flooded my body instantly. Victor read the screen. His jaw tightened once. No panic. Which scared me more. Describe him, Victor texted back from Daniel's phone using the hotel Wi-Fi network. The response came quickly. Mid-40s, gray jacket, earpiece. Victor stared at the message, then quietly muttered something under his breath. He looked at me carefully. That's not freelance intimidation. My stomach dropped. What does that mean? It means organized. Another message arrived. He's not hiding it. Victor immediately deleted the thread, then started the engine. We move now. What about Daniel? He'll be fine. He's the distraction. The bluntness of that sentence shocked me. But deep down, I knew Victor trusted Daniel's visibility to protect him. No one disappears a witness in daylight downtown. At least not anymore. I hoped. Victor drove toward the financial district while avoiding main intersections. The city outside suddenly felt hostile. Every reflective window looked like surveillance. Every stranger potentially connected. My breathing became shallow without me realizing. Breathe slower, Victor said quietly. I looked at him. You sound very experienced at this. A long pause followed. Then finally, I grew up around wealthy people protecting ugly secrets. That explained more about Victor Mercer than anything else ever had. The private bank occupied the lower levels of a granite building with almost no signage. No advertisements. No visible branding. Again, real money rarely introduces itself loudly. Inside, everything felt muted. Soft carpeting, low voices, controlled lighting. The receptionist looked at the silver key once and immediately changed expression. Professional warmth vanished. Respect replaced it. That frightened me. We'll escort you downstairs, she said quietly. No paperwork. No questions. Just immediate compliance. Meaning my father's arrangements carried weight even now. The elevator descended deeper than expected. Sublevel after sublevel. Concrete walls. Restricted access doors. The atmosphere shifted from banking to containment. A security officer guided us into a private viewing room, then placed a long black deposit box onto the table between us. My hands started trembling again. Not from fear exactly. Anticipation. The terrifying kind. Victor slid the key toward me. For a moment I couldn't touch it. Because opening that box meant opening the version of my father hidden from me my entire life. Finally, I picked it up, inserted it slowly, turned. The lock clicked open with soft mechanical finality. And somewhere deep inside me, something else opened too. Inside the box sat three things: a sealed envelope, a flash drive, and a photograph. I lifted the photograph first. My father stood beside Senator Elliot Crane again. Only this time they weren't smiling. They were arguing. Violently. And written across the bottom in my father's handwriting were 7 words that stopped my heart completely. If anything happens to me, it was him. Victor went completely still beside me. And before either of us could speak, the lights in the room suddenly shut off. Total darkness swallowed everything instantly. Then somewhere beyond the vault door, we heard screaming. The darkness lasted less than 3 seconds. But fear stretches time strangely. Long enough for me to hear my own breathing. Long enough to hear someone running outside the vault room. Long enough for every terrible possibility to bloom at once inside my head. Then emergency lights flickered on. Dim red. Low visibility. The kind of lighting that instantly makes ordinary spaces feel dangerous. Victor stood immediately. Stay behind me. Not dramatic. Automatic. Like instinct. Outside the private viewing room, alarms began pulsing softly through the underground level. Not deafening. Controlled, which somehow felt more unsettling. Because controlled systems imply controlled people. The security officer who brought us downstairs appeared at the doorway, visibly shaken. We're experiencing a temporary system outage. Victor's eyes narrowed slightly. How temporary? We don't know yet. Liar. I could hear it immediately. And apparently Victor could too. Because the officer wouldn't look directly at the deposit box. Or the photograph in my hand. Victor closed the box calmly. Too calmly. Then looked at me. Take the envelope. I obeyed instantly. No hesitation left now. Fear simplifies decision-making. The officer stepped forward slightly. Sir, bank policy requires all materials remain. Victor cut him off. Call your supervisor. The authority in his voice changed the room immediately. Not louder. Just colder. And suddenly I realized something important about Victor Mercer. He wasn't simply wealthy. He was accustomed to winning quiet battles. The officer backed off. Only slightly. But enough. Victor leaned toward me without looking directly at me. When we leave this room, do not stop walking. My pulse spiked again. Victor. Listen carefully. Still calm. Still controlled. The outage wasn't random. The emergency lights painted sharp shadows across his face. And neither was the timing. Outside the corridor, another shout echoed faintly underground. Then hurried footsteps. Metal doors opening somewhere nearby. Victor grabbed the deposit box. Move. We exited into the corridor fast but not visibly panicked. That part mattered, apparently. People notice panic. Confidence buys seconds. Seconds keep people alive. The underground hallway felt completely different. Earlier it resembled discreet luxury. Now it looked like a bunker. Red emergency lights. Concrete walls. Security personnel speaking rapidly into radios. And beneath all of it, something invisible tightening. We reached the elevator. Dead? Of course. Stairs, Victor said immediately. The security officer moved again. Sir, clients are asked to remain in designated areas until systems return online. Victor finally looked directly at him. And for the first time, I saw genuine menace in his expression. Not aggression. Capability. She's leaving, Victor said softly. The officer hesitated. Wrong decision. Victor stepped closer. Not threatening physically, but psychologically. You already know why this outage happened. Silence. And if you delay us another 10 seconds, Victor continued quietly, you become part of it. The officer's face changed instantly. There it was. Fear. Real fear. Not of Victor. Of someone else. Then he stepped aside. Service stairwell, he muttered. Third door left. We moved fast after that. Concrete staircases, echoing footsteps. My heart slamming painfully against my ribs. The envelope pressed tightly beneath my arm. And through it all, one thought kept repeating in my head. My father knew. He knew something dangerous enough to leave evidence in a hidden vault 20 years ago. By the time we reached street level, rain had started again. Cold. The city blurred silver beneath afternoon traffic. Victor guided me sharply toward an alley beside the building. No hesitation. No wasted movement. Who are these people? I whispered. He looked both directions before answering. People who survive by making problems disappear quietly. That answer chilled me more than anything else so far. Because he didn't sound uncertain. He sounded familiar with them. A black SUV rolled slowly past the alley entrance. Not stopping. Just slow enough to notice us. My stomach dropped. Victor. I saw it. He grabbed my wrist gently. Walk on. We moved through crowded sidewalks quickly. Not running. Again. Panic attracts attention. The city noise wrapped around us, horns, voices, rain against umbrellas, while my nervous system screamed at me to move faster. Open the envelope, Victor said suddenly. My fingers shook violently as I tore it open beneath the cover of my coat. Inside sat a single handwritten letter. My father's handwriting. I recognized it instantly. Messy. Pressed too hard into the paper, like he always feared thoughts might disappear unless written forcefully. If you're reading this, then your mother could no longer protect you from what I failed to finish. My vision blurred immediately. Victor guided me into a crowded cafe near the next intersection. Warm air hit us instantly. Coffee? Wet coats. Normal life continuing around us while mine cracked apart cell by cell. We took the back corner table. Victor positioned himself facing the entrance automatically. Again. Experience. Keep reading, he said quietly. I lowered my eyes back to the letter. I made terrible mistakes. Not criminal ones at first. Cowardly ones. I stayed around dangerous men because success felt important. By the time I understood what they were building, leaving became impossible. My chest tightened painfully. The cafe sounds around me faded completely. Senator Crane was not the architect. Only the public face. The money moved through charities, construction projects, overseas foundations, and political donors. I copied everything before they discovered I knew. If they learn the records survived, they will come for whoever has them. I stopped breathing briefly. The flash drive. Your mother wanted to destroy all of it after my death. I refused. Some truths become heavier when buried. Victor watched the entrance while I continued reading. Rain streaked the windows behind him. People laughed near the espresso counter. A woman rocked a stroller gently beside the door. The ordinary world looked almost offensive now. If you grew up believing we were ruined, it is because your mother chose survival over wealth. She hid what remained because money tied to dangerous people poisons everyone near it. Do not blame her for that. I asked her to disappear. Tears blurred the ink. Because suddenly my mother's entire life made tragic sense. The fear. The secrecy. The isolation after his death. She wasn't emotionally collapsing randomly. She was hiding. Protecting me. Possibly for decades. Then I reached the final paragraph. And everything inside me stopped. There is one copy beyond this one. If Arthur Bennett finally gave you the key, it means someone has started looking again. Trust no public hero. Especially the ones people call saviors. And Lena. If Crane ever learns you have the records. Run. The cafe door opened sharply. Victor's eyes lifted immediately. His body stiffened. Subtle, but unmistakable. A man entered wearing a gray jacket. Mid-40s. Earpiece. Exactly matching Daniel's description. He scanned the cafe once. Calm. Professional. Then his gaze landed directly on me. Victor leaned forward slightly. Do not look away from me, he whispered. Every nerve in my body ignited. What do we do? Victor's expression stayed unreadable. Right now? A pause. Then quietly. We survive long enough to understand.